So it's been a long week for Browns fans because of how last week's game went down and ended. And, there's a mixed emotions between being heartbreaking that you didn't win that game versus taking the positive signs that were in that game and projecting those things onward, which leaves us to feeling awkward about the second game of the year. But this should be an exciting moment for Cleveland Browns fans as the Browns are going to have their first regular season game with full capacity crowd in a very long time, over a year. So what is at store for this game versus the Texans? Are the Texans a team that can sneak up on the Cleveland Browns and matches up well with them? Well, we'll talk about that and more. But before I get into that, I want to make sure I give a shout out to my patreon.com dog check tier members. I'm going to start with Michael Mateek, Michael Morales, Mark Kahn, Max Haymaker, Drake, Nick Merrick, Mike Labra, Wes and Megan, DA, and Jay. Greg Ehlers, Austin Bolin, Easley Bash, Joe Hart, Gabriel Wilson, Fred Pratt III, David Valtiara, Relentless Buck, Chunt, Rex Kaufman, Kevin Johnston, Cleveland Cart, Matt H, Sign Sheets, Gemini, Lewin Freeman, Fight Dirty 74, Yo-Yo, Matt Lloyd, Paul Wilcox, Hundo Magnifico, Kyle Stouffer, Lukey from Munich, Deveroff, J Guy 101, Musty Taco, Joe Bobby, Brad Cowboy, Dylan W, James McGinley, Arendal, Chad Gimme, David Maldonado, Dylan Hill, Josh Bendor, Jaleel Salim Jr., Mark M, Stuart Moore, Cleveland BCI, Robert Jermaine Jr., Dave Mike May, Andrew Hirsch, Curtis Bear, Batman, Barack Kumar, John Albert, Beerman 069, Masayua Buzzer, Roland James Nemo, Mac House, Reeve Hertz, Philip Wilcox, and Marie River, Sean Barron, Gagos Pisano, Corporal Nick Lopez, Dom Gazzola, Nick Nasty, Ian Whitaker, Colin 216, Christian, Dave Strong, Michael Stone, Billy Moose Gentry, Austin Z, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Wolf, Dog Pound Kai, Lydia, Jesus Serrano, Alexander Davis, Chris Phones, Picktown Browns backer, Max Nilikenko, Mark Khan, Max Aldojo, and Water Bear Marketing. Thank you guys so much for the support on Patreon. It means a ton to me, and that's why I continue to put you front and center in these videos, because I don't want your contribution to this channel to go ignored. So again, guys, thank you so much. Now let's get into the video. Okay, so first things first, right? We got to look at the injury situation when it comes to this game. And we know that the Browns traditionally, they overcautiously kind of put everybody on the injury report, so the list looks a lot larger than what it's actually going to be when it comes to game day. But what we know right now, no Odell Beckham. You're probably going to have Jack Conklin. It's looking like Grant Delpit's going to play. Michael Dunn, Troy Hill's definitely going to play. He's on the injury report. Now, there is a little bit of a jam here, right? Both Jedrick Wills and Chris Hubbard, as the time of recording this video, Friday morning, have not practiced. That's not good. That's not good at all, right? Because if they're not going to play, then maybe you put Michael Dunn in at left tackle. Either way, it's not an ideal situation there for your left tackle spot. So hopefully one of those guys can get healthy and play. You also have J.C. Treader, who usually doesn't practice that much. He hasn't practiced so far. So I'm not ringing the alarm bells on J.C. Treader just because he's a veteran. They usually like to give veterans a day off or practices off when they're working off of injuries. And J.C. Treader, he's been working off of injuries for quite a while now, like over a year and a half. So he usually doesn't really practice that much. So I'm not surprised to see him not practicing. But Brown's a little banged up here. You look at the Texans, and Farrell Brown, who's one of their best players on offense, has not practiced all week, which is going to be a big deal for the Texans. But that's the injury situation. Now let's break down this game from an X's and O's standpoint, from the defensive side of the ball for the Cleveland Browns, and that's where we're going to start. Now, I was able to watch Houston's win over the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think there were some interesting things that I gleaned there. Some things that I thought happened just because the Jags weren't that good at football, but other things I think Houston is genuinely good at. They moved the ball well through the air in that game, but one thing I did notice is that they were not great on the ground, and they have a list of running backs in Houston that, if we were talking about like 2 years ago, would have legit been like the talk of the league, right? They got Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, and David Johnson, like three people who not too long ago were considered really good running backs. Now they're pretty average, and it's a trio that put up some average results against a not so great Jacksonville Jaguars defense. They had 37 carries, those three running backs, 120 yards, which is 3.2 yards per carry. For reference, the Browns average about 5.1 yards per carry versus the Chiefs. So that's not a good number, 3.2 yards per carry. So that run game, despite it having names that you would know, not really that great of a run game. And the one concerning thing for the Texans is that they go to that run game a ton. They run much, much more than they pass the ball there in Houston. And that's a little bit of a concern. If the run game with that many carries is really only going to produce about 3.2 yards per carry, that means that they're going to log jam up against a lot of better defenses, and hopefully that's what the Browns can do. Now let's talk about the quarterback position. Tyrod Taylor, he's very interesting, right? Interesting career, interesting story with him. He's underrated to a point. I am a Tyrod Taylor fan, but when I was watching him versus the Jaguars, I saw some of this good stuff that you get from Tyrod Taylor. You know, his ability to throw on the run, be mobile, all those things that Tyrod does well that people don't really talk about. But also, I saw some concerning things with Tyrod Taylor. And it's not that Tyrod's not a mobile quarterback anymore. He's still quick. He's still going to be able to evade sacks and move around in the pocket, and you don't really want to get him outside of the pocket for real. But where Tyrod has lost the gear, I think, is in his top speed, right? When he goes in that top gear, they go into his top speed. It's just not the same that it used to be. So he's aged a little bit in that aspect. Also, another interesting thing that I digged up on Tyrod Taylor from his first game is that apparently, according to PFF at least, he's much better when he's blitzed and pressured. That's not a typo. When Tyrod was blitzed or pressured, he had a 80.9 PFF grade and an 80.7. Those are fantastic PFF grades. But when he was not blitzed, that grade dropped all the way to 60.8. And even more interesting, when he had a clean pocket, it was his lowest grade of all those passing splits. And that was 57.6. And on first glance, this is pretty confusing because literally like no other quarterback has those kind of splits. But then when I look back at Tyrod and how he played in Buffalo, how he plays in Cleveland, just kind of how he plays the quarterback position, starts to make a lot of sense, because Tyrod, at his heart, when it comes to decision making as a quarterback, plays the game very similar to a Case Keenum. And if you guys have watched my preseason coverage, you know Case Keenum makes me rip my hair out. Why? Because Case Keenum falls in love with the checkdowns. He falls in love with the underneaths. He falls in love with the short stuff, and he doesn't want to take any risk with the football, which is just not the way to play the quarterback position and win games in the NFL or to reach any level of efficiency. And when Tyrod is not pressured, when he's allowed to be on schedule, he's going to go to what he thinks as a quarterback and his instincts as a quarterback, and that's going to be the underneath stuff. That's going to be the checkdowns, and that's going to be the stuff that makes it a lot easier to defend Tyrod Taylor. But when you blitz him, and when you pressure him, it allows him to get on the run. And when he's on the run, he's much more accurate as a passer, and he's much more daring as a thrower. So he's willing to go downfield and make the big play because he does have a good deep ball. It's just he doesn't go to it very often, and he really only goes to it when he's on the run or when he's on a scramble drill. So that's an interesting thing to watch with Tyrod Taylor. I don't know if that means that you don't blitz him, but I think it would benefit you to maybe not be super aggressive with the blitzes this week, because then you can have Tyrod do his dink and dunk game a lot more, which is just a lot more predictable and a lot easier to defend for this defense than it is if he goes on the run. So for the Browns defense this week, I expect the game plan would be to spend a bulk of the game in their base 4-3 packages. I think last week they spent a lot of time in that nickel. This week they're going to spend a lot of time in that 4-3. One, the Texans run the ball way more than they pass, so having more linebackers on the field is going to be able to stop the run, of course. Also, having more linebackers on the field is something that can help limit scramble lanes, right? Because you're going to keep them closer to the line of scrimmage than you would a defensive back in like a nickel. So those scramble lanes kind of are reduced just because there's more people there to take care of it. And unlike the Chiefs, where you cannot run your base 4-3 and put 3 linebackers on the field versus a team that has as many weapons as Kansas City, the Texans don't present those same problems from the skill position players that you can get away with having your base 4-3. Now, this is going to leave an interesting question, right? Because I talked about Farrell Brown being one of the better players for the Texans last week, and who's going to defend him. And I think the natural answer would be to go with JOK on Farrell Brown. I don't think that's a great solution. One, Malcolm Smith is somebody who's a good coverage linebacker, a little bit taller, a little bit bigger, and that's kind of the tight end that Malcolm Smith is more adept to taking care of. And also, I think it might be a waste of JOK to stick him on a tight end and just say, hey, that's your responsibility all game, because I think there'll be way more opportunities for JOK to affect the game if he's out there at the will linebacker position and able to sniff out. One, because the Texans offense just isn't super imaginative. It's a pretty base standard offense, and especially when Tyrod isn't being pressured, he goes to kind of the same stuff all the time. He's fairly predictable, which has been one of Tyrod's biggest problems as a quarterback, and I don't think that's going to change. And I think JOK is the type of guy in coverage that can take advantage of that predictability that you're going to see out of Tyrod Taylor in this passing game, and he's going to be able to make a few plays here. You know, they run a lot of screens, they run a lot of underneath routes, they run a lot of shallow posts and a lot of things like that JOK can kind of use his instincts, use his twitchiness to jump in front of or make a big play there. That I think is going to be a lot more effective than if he were just kind of stuck on a tight end the whole game. I don't think that's the best way to use JOK, and I hope they use him more and get comfortable with him being out there, because I do think there's a massive opportunity for him this week. So that's kind of defensively how I see the game plan going. You want to see JOK out there. You feel good about your secondary versus this skill position group, and you just want to make sure that they don't get as aggressive with going upfield with the edge rushers that they were last week, where they were just creating all of these scramble lanes for Patrick Mahomes, that they kind of tamp that down, tamp that aggressiveness down, and just allow Tyrod Taylor to stay in the pocket and get clean there so he can go underneath and you can make plays on the ball, because that's really where you put Tyrod Taylor in a bind, is when you go at the stuff that he's very predictable at, which is him when he has a clean pocket. So that's the big thing there for the defense. Now let's talk about the offense. Now for the Browns offense, this is interesting. Just because it can go either way, because I think the Texans defense, they're just as vulnerable through the air as they are on the ground. I think they're slightly more vulnerable through the air. I think their secondary has a little bit more holes in it, and I think the Browns will just be very familiar with their secondary personnel, because their top three snap getters are Eric Murray, Christian Kirksey, and Terrence Mitchell, three people who used to be on the Browns, and I think Baker Mayfield is practicing again. So there's some familiarity there. And again, T. Mitch is a number one corner. I like him as a number two guy. I think he's a pretty solid number two / depth guy. You really don't want him being your number one corner, and that's really kind of the position he's in, or at least he takes the most snaps out of any corner that the Texans have, or took the most snaps last week than any corner the Texans have. So that's a little bit of concern for them. And I think that you can get guys like David Njoku open a lot more often. I think you can definitely see Donovan Peoples-Jones having a big game in this one, or even maybe like a Rashard Higgins, right? I think that that's all possible for the passing attack. The running game, it's going to be there. I don't expect the Texans to take it away. And I just don't think the Texans have the personnel defensively to stop this offense if this offense is performing at all cylinders. Now, we have to see what the left tackle situation is, right? If the Browns just don't have a left tackle, that could complicate things and make the Browns lean on the run game a lot more often, just because you can get away without a left tackle when you run the ball. It's a lot harder to do it if you're going to go with the pass-heavy attack here. So we have to see what happens with the tackle position, right? You have to see if either Wills or Chris Hubbard can come back. If neither of those two can come back, that definitely does change how you go about this game. But even then, the Texans don't have anybody at edge or on that defensive line that would make me so concerned to make me think that you can't drop back 30 to 40 times against this defense and be fine with it. So that's kind of my breakdown of this game. Look, at the end of the day, this is a game that the Browns should win. You know, this is one of those games for the Cleveland Browns, if they are who we think they are, that it's not really going to be newsworthy no matter how much they win by. It's only going to be newsworthy if they lose this game or if they almost lose this game. So that's the kind of pressure that the Browns are on. Now, it's the home opener. They won the home opener last year. There's really not that same problem mentally for the fan base that you have with the opening game, right? So it's not the same thing there. But all in all, this is a Texans team that the Browns at this point should really be able to beat easily. So that's where I'm at with this game. Let me know where you're at down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.